Okay. Well, oh, great. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to Fordham Road Collaborative, the Kushner Report. As you know, I'm Robert Brancatelli, and this is Dennis Kushner. You can reach us at Fordham Road Collaborative, or I'm sorry, fordhamroad.net, and our email addresses are just below RGB at fordhamroad.net and DTK at fordhamroad.net. And as Dennis said, we're going to be doing artificial intelligence today and next month. Dennis, next month is
In May, we'll do the biotechnology outlook for 2022.
perfect. Okay. And here's the agenda. Dennis, it's all yours.
Okay, so welcome, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Kushner Report for April of 2022. At the conclusion of the presentation this morning, you'll be able to participate in our question and answer session. So I hope you'll engage and get involved with the program as I finish the slides later in the program. So today, what we're going to look at, the agenda will be, we're going to talk about key economic indicators, the global economy, the domestic economy, mergers and acquisitions, other significant economic news, and then what's ahead in 2022. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. So one of the things that's very interesting is artificial intelligence is something that's growing by leaps and bounds around the world. And so, for example, the term artificial intelligence was coined by John McCarthy in the research proposal he prepared in 1956 for a workshop at Dartmouth University that would kick off the humans' efforts on this topic. So the AI topic basically is that McCarthy outlined something as an introduction to see how computers can work and be used with human beings and human language. So that was the beginning. So what is artificial intelligence? Well, essentially, it's the ability of machines or the ability of a computer to perform tasks that would normally require human intelligence. And it's becoming an increasingly urgent topic of discussion in the C-suites, newsrooms, academic institutions around the world. So artificial intelligence is really a theory and development of computer systems that can perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. So you've got speech recognition, decision-making, what we call visual perception, and examples, for example, would be of human intelligence and artificial intelligence and their processes. So what's interesting here is that artificial intelligence is really, it's important because it enables human capabilities. So it's understanding, reasoning, we're talking about planning, communications, and perception. And really, it's undertaken by software, and it's increasingly becoming effective, efficient, and very low cost. And that will be the key for the future. So when you look at the techniques of artificial intelligence, it really focuses on four key areas. There's machine learning, you've got natural language processing, automation and robotics, which you'll hear more about, and of course, machine vision. So artificial intelligence really refers to the simulation of human intelligence in a machine that is programmed to think like humans. And the real key is this: the main advantage is it defines more powerful and more useful computers. On the disadvantage side, the implementation of cost is extremely high. And there's where the unbalance takes place. So some of the main key features are that we're looking at problem decomposition into subproblems. You know, can the solution step be ignored or undone? Is the problem universally predictable? And is good solution to be performed obvious without comparisons to all possible solutions? So knowledge representation and reasoning in the field of artificial intelligence is dedicated to representing information about the world in a form that computers can be used and be done to solve complex problems, such as diagnosing medical conditions or even coming up with potential solutions and alternatives to a medical condition. And the need to know basically is artificial intelligence is automatically reasoning machine. So it performs automatic functions based on thinking. What's interesting is artificial intelligence is really designed for human beings. Now, if you can believe this, in 2019, the world spent almost $38 billion on artificial intelligence. And researchers are predicting by the time we get to 2026, we'll spend about $8 billion in artificial intelligence in the healthcare service just alone. Now, there are significant strengths and weaknesses of this. One of the strengths, for example, is in the gaming area. And in games such as chess and Lido and tic-tac, et cetera, it really plays a key role. So the systems should have the ability to create a self-thinking power to understanding the steps. Systems in terms of reductions, we're looking here as AI systems provide a great facility of error reductions and accurate measurements and values. We see this all the time. And in the area of smart apps in our daily life, artificial intelligence is used in face detection and also in terms of picture taking and as well as voice recognition. In terms of job repetition, artificial intelligence covers the repetitious jobs, which are basically multiple programs that can be performed with machines. So a machine never thinks faster than a human being. And if you look at the calculations and regular work of analysis, a machine is much stronger than a human being. If you look at the kids today, everybody has some type of an instrument. Instead of doing mathematics with a slide rule for some of us that are young, or just using a pen or pencil, they're using some type of an item. It could be an iPhone, it could be an iPad, etc. So you're using a lot of technology now for figuring things out without having to worry about making a lot of mistakes. The area of the medical field is one of the key targets for artificial intelligence, and the systems assist doctors to easily and accurately diagnose diseases. And it helps doctors to learn about medicines and methodology, and it's a vital role. So it's used to diagnose tumors, for example, in the human body, and cure them with suitable and perfect methods, and providing a lot of alternative solutions. And that's what we really need. However, there are weaknesses, and that is there's a lack of thinking power. So no original creativity here. So artificial intelligence it's really it's not able to develop as a person. And this is the most important difference. Artificial intelligence is really a frozen of knowledge. And so we'll see, but keep in mind, artificial intelligence will never, ever create a piece of genius music, such as in rock and roll and all kinds of things. It's not going to happen. The other thing is, which is a major concern, is the cost. So when combining the expense of establishment, upkeep, and fixing it, AI is an expensive proposition. And repair and maintenance of AI machines, of course, requires a huge investment. And the AI machines are really based on programming and software. Threats, of course. However, the danger of AI innovation is genuine, and AI will supplant human occupation. So we will see this going forward. And the cause of unemployment, AI is really a cause of unemployment. We're seeing that the main point of artificial intelligence is related to job losses. So the replacement of humans with AI machines can really lead to large-scale unemployment. And as Bruce Conklin and I talked about a couple of months ago, we're going to have to figure out a way for those people that are losing their jobs. They're going to have to be trained and develop new skills to move forward. So there's a whole new era that'll coming up in the future. Keep in mind that robots have just as numerous employments in mechanical production systems, and it's the age, if you will, considering a lot of employments taking place with robots. If you look at some of the factories I've seen online in China, the factories are just are run by very few people, and they're done mostly with robots across the board. So you're seeing more of that taking place. Amazon, a lot of these companies use robots all the time. So who's the world leader in AI? Guess what? We are. So the United States dwarfs everybody else in AI, and it's followed up by the United Kingdom, Germany, and then fourth would be China. Well, we outdwarf everybody almost 7-1. So there are 9 predictions for artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence has really worked its way into everyday lives, and in doing so has given businesses, many industries, a chance to leverage it for better marketing opportunities and smoother operations. So for example, if you look at algorithms, AI is starting to have big impact in almost every facet of our lives. And I believe that we'll see significant improvements going forward in algorithms. And if you look at what Google does, they really do a great job in using algorithms to deliver search. Personalized experiences, we see most significant ways will change the game is being offered by your personalized experience. So for example, you look at TikTok in particular, it's off the charts when it comes to analyzing what users really want and then trying to find out a way to provide that immediately. And online ads are going to become even more specific than they are today. And we're going to see customers become more receptive to them going forward. You identify customer leads. That's a big issue right now. I expect to see more efficiency and productivity gains here. And with the current labor shortage and inflation, automation will be more important than ever before, especially in 2022. So specifically, this technology can help businesses with several tasks, including in identifying leads and businesses and the value proposition to its customers. More relevant targets, again, we already see how AI works when you talk about something out loud, and then all of a sudden social media ads respond to it. Automating the customer service process is going to be huge. One of the biggest trends I believe we're going to see this year is in automating customer service. And we'll see, thanks to recent advances that have allowed for things like customer suggestions, modern customers have sky-high expectations of what to expect in the future. And again, AI can be used to automate much of the customer service process by tracking everything and getting history and routing all the data. So for example, if you went online and you bought something at Amazon, you signed on to your account again, and guess what? They come up with some other suggestions. For example, it happens all the time when you want to buy a book. It'll come up and give you some other ideas about similar books, perhaps in terms of content or maybe by authors. So it's somewhat very subtle. The other thing is it's going to be more realistic environments. What you're going to see is AI will play a larger role in the metaverse, which includes many gaming, AR and VR applications. So Facebook is a leader in this particular area. And we're seeing the fact that in the coming years, human users and AI applications are going to work together and create even more realistic online environments. So I think you're going to see a lot of this moving forward in 2022. Automating the telemarketing openers, for example, you're going to see with all the staff shortages and on record of job vacancies needed to be filled, 2021 will be a pivotal year. And I think you're going to see automation and artificial intelligence play a significant role. And in the sales area, for example, artificial intelligence has replaced the need for telemarketing openers. Augmenting the workforce, I think we'll see here that AI will not replace human workers, but will add efficiency. So in many cases, workers and machines will work side by side to do things, but some of the human tasks will be eliminated, such as where robotics are used, such as picking and so forth of products and inventories. So I think we're going to see a lot of that taking place as we go forward. So, I mean, that kind of gives you a thumbnail about artificial intelligence. It's something that's going to be part of our lives going forward, and it's just exploding all over the place. So I think that those are some of the things I wanted to talk about from a prediction standpoint going forward. So now what I'd like to do is talk about our key economic indicators. I'm going to talk about GDP, inflation, unemployment at the federal level, the California level, and what's near and dear to everyone's heart is the price per barrel of oil. So, for example, if we take a look this year, where the asks that's the data that changed since my last presentation. So first of all, the global GDP is now forecasting at 3.1%. It's down from what it was a month ago. And then they're looking at 2.4% next year. In the United States, it's now looking at 2.8%, dropping down to 2.1. And this is the real thing that's a big concern right now, and that is inflation. They're looking at inflation this year going out probably by the end of the year at 7.4%, and that's got to come down substantially. That's having a major impact. Now, there are those that are talking about the word recession, and most of the people out there that are talking about it are saying it's probably less than 30% happening within the next year and a half. And again, this is all speculation. It's somewhat Kentucky windage. And if you look at inflation for next year, because of all the interest rate hikes and hopefully the supply chain issues getting more resolved and oil being more productive and more plentiful, we're looking at maybe 2.9% next year. Now, the unemployment rate has dropped substantially in the United States across the board to 3.8% and down to 3% next year. California, as you know, typically follows the rest of the country. In other words, when the economy starts to go down, we're the last to go into a recession and we're the last to come out of it. So we're looking at 4.5 this year and 4.1 next year. The area of the price per barrel is in terms of West Texas Intermediate, and the range is somewhere between $80 and $125. If you go back a few weeks ago, it was well over 131. So I looked this morning, it was around $102.12. So it is down. It's coming down slightly, but that's kind of where it's been the last couple of weeks in that particular range. Now let's take a look at the global economy. So, the dollar relative to foreign currencies is still pretty strong. And we're seeing that the Federal Reserve and monetary tightening is going to occur. And we'll talk more about that later in the presentation. But we've lowered our medium-term targets for the yen, euro, and the pound. And we do expect some resilience in the Australian, Canadian, and New Zealand dollars going forward. And I think that we'll see only moderate losses in that area. However, in Asia, there's a revisional forecast are now looking at several Asian and Eastern European currencies becoming lower later in the year. And then the central banks, for example, most of the banks remain on addressing uncomfortably high inflation. So over the past month, the central banks of Sweden, Norway, and Mexico and United Kingdom are among others that expect to raise rates sometime in May and June. So it's going to happen across the board. Now we look at Latin America. While Latin America currencies have performed pretty solidly early in 2022, expectations are that the region's currencies will begin to soften over time during the year. The Eurozone, this is a real rocketing type of situation here that CPI inflation in March rose to 7.5% year over year. And that's driven primarily by higher energy prices and other price gains that were more modest. So that's a very big concern in the Eurozone. The Bank of Canada has already taken steps. This month, in April, they've raised their basis points by 50 basis points, and they'll continue to do that until they feel they can get their hands around inflation. United Kingdom soars while growth is slowing. Here, the inflation is up, expected to go out the end of the year by 7% over last year. Again, the same thing is happening there. Higher inflation because of slowing growth and the price of food and petroleum and everything, very consistent across the board. China's economic outlook, and when we started doing the program, they were up somewhere around 9 or 10%. First quarter is somewhat dismal. There's been another wave of infections, and strict virus containment policies are placing pressure on consumer spending nationwide. And we believe that the economy will grow only at 4.9% this year. And that's based on some forecasts we have. But again, that's at this point, we don't get some of the data coming out of China is not as accurate as we'd like to see, but 4.9% is substantially lower for China than we've seen in the past. Now, domestically, for those of you in the construction industry is moving forward at a strong pace in spite of the fact of material and labor headwinds. Total construction spending is predicted to go up by about 0.5 of a point this year, especially in February. And you're looking at somewhere around $1.7 trillion sitting out there for projects in the area. So this is very good. And basically represents about 11.2% growth from year to year, from this year over last year. However, in the public sector, public construction declined by 0.4 of a point last month. So you have highways and streets, education and transportation spending were down 1.3%. However, in the area of supplies such as sewage and water disposal and public safety programs, we saw moderate rises in growth. So I think across the board, the construction industry is still very strong, and hopefully it'll get stronger as the year continues on. For those of you like Ed Snyder, a technology wizard, the technology space continues to drive our economy. It's basically, we're looking at internet search, data processing, software, digital media, really providing the greatest boost to the economy, especially in the fourth quarter. And last year, we're looking at the last quarter, fourth quarter, we saw a 20% growth in this sector. So that's very good and very strong for the group. So looking ahead, well, here's the concern we have. It's called inflation. So inflation in March was up 8.5%. That's over a 40-year high. It goes back to 1981. And basically prices continue to escalate. And underscoring this, the inflationary prices is supply chain disruptions and shortages lingering in different in vertical markets across the economy. And some of the biggest contributors, as you know, inflation were food, shelter, and gasoline. And that's a big concern. And gasoline was up, I think it was like 8.5% last month. So in terms of trade exports, we saw a little bit of a decline, about 1.7%. So we're still running around $155 billion a month in trade exports. here's the biggest concern, and that is the trade deficit. So we talked about this a couple of years ago. We were trying to get down below 50. The last 3 months, it's been over $80 billion. The last 2 months alone, it's been $89 billion in deficits. And this is the total deficit. So we're now looking at somewhere about $1.2 to $1.3 trillion deficit going out the end of this year. And that's having a major negative effect on our economy. In the area of retail sales, sales were 0.5 of a point in March among soaring inflation. As I mentioned earlier, other things such as gasoline, food, etc., grew and then really took a lot of money out of customers' wallets. But excluding 8.9% increase in the gas stations, overall retail sales slipped by 0.3 of a point last month. So again, the biggest driver here is at the pump. Now, taking a look at the employment picture, it's still strong. Payrolls increased by 431,000 last month. Unemployment, as I said earlier, dropped to 3.6 from 3.8 in February. The two key areas I want you to look at is business and professional services over the last, let's say, 15 to 20 months has been positive, growing substantially, which is good. And the sector that got hit the worst during the pandemic was leisure and hospitality. So we're seeing 112,000 jobs come back in that area. I mean, that took the worst hit during the downturn. And as I mentioned earlier, construction, it was at 19,000. So it's continuing to move along here. And you see, of course, some upturn in the area of health and education. Now, if we take a look at California, we had a modest increase of about 60,000 jobs in March. Unemployment decreased to 4.9%, and that's down from 5.4 in February. And again, the biggest thing we've talked about before with Jim Carr and everybody is the fact that we lack truck drivers, especially in California. And as I said earlier in January, the expectations are they need to hire over 1 million truck drivers to move product in the United States. And some of these, for example, like you're from the chemical business, like gas and oil, et cetera, there's certain kinds of certifications that one must have to be able to drive these trucks. So that's a big problem with the economy. California saw we're up almost 9,000 jobs in the area of construction. The real key again was leisure and hospitality grew, which is very good. So when we talk about inflation, I want to talk about interest rates right now. So on May the 3rd and 4th, our friends in the Federal Open Market Committee will meet next week. And it's believed by many economists that we're going to see 50 basis points hike, not 25, but 50. And they're going to have to do what they can to try to get their arms around inflation. So we'll see what happens to that next month, actually next week starting. We'll talk about that next May when I do my program. In the area of mortgage rates, and this is for Michelle and some of the folks that are in the real estate area, the average 30-year fixed loan the other day is up to 5.25%, and that's up from 4.72 about 2 weeks ago. So it's growing. And what's happening is it's going to have a major effect on first-time buyers getting into the market. As I mentioned before, in the month of December, 30% of the people that bought new homes were first-time buyers. So this is going to have a major effect going forward. The home buyer, the demand for mortgages within the last 2 weeks is down 13.1%. We're seeing that declining across the board as people are backing off in terms of refinancing, number one, and number two, buying new homes. The manufacturing index, again, has been very strong, which is good news. It dropped down about 1.5 points, but we're over 50. We're at 58.6, which is good. Anything over 50 is very strong. Now, you remember several months ago, we dropped down to 49. And when you're dropping down below 50, it's a sign of moving into a recession or you're already in a recession. So the index is real strong. By the way, in general, our economy is strong. Regardless of what's going on, the economy is strong. We're still seeing a lot of hiring taking place, et cetera. So we're still very strong right now. That could change later in the year, but right now it's strong. So when we look at if we look now at factory orders declined 0.5 of a point last month to about $542 billion, a slight decline. And this is the first decline we've seen since April of last year. It's been relatively flat or growing, so that's a little bit of a concern. In the area of small business confidence, it fell to a two-year low. And what we're saying here is that, again, this goes back to when COVID was starting to ramp up. One of the concerns we had, and Bruce Conklin and I talked about this, is as the loan ratios change, and you have your lending covenants, etc. When those start changing, those companies that are kind of wobbly terms are going to have problems going forward, and that we could see more companies in trouble with their financial situations, and some of these may go into bankruptcy. And we may see a lot of that happening as interest rates go up. So the only way to change those debt to equity ratios, if you will, is looking at ways where you have softness, and that is in people. So you may see layoffs starting to take place going forward if these companies can't meet their loan expectations with their lenders. We look at consumer confidence. It rose slightly to 107 over 105 in February. It's still pretty strong in terms of how the consumer is looking at things. And as I mentioned earlier, in March, the price per barrel of crude oil was at $114, and it was down to $102 the other day. So it's a drop of $12 a barrel, and hopefully we'll see that come down much more. So regardless of what's going on with Russia, we're hoping that we'll see more production taking place in the United States and also with our partners in the Middle East. Housing starts rose about 0.3 of a point in March, and that represents about 3.9% higher than a year ago. Home sales, for example, in the area here in Southern California, basically dropped by 1.9% in March. Now in LA County, for the inventory that's online, the median price rose by 13.3% to $781,000 is the midpoint, but sales were down by 5.8%. And if we look, for example, at in Orange County, which is the real bellwether here, sales increased, the median price basically increased by 3.6%. So the midpoint of a home there is 1.305 million, which is pretty substantial. However, sales were down 19.4% last month. And then finally in San Diego County, the midpoint rose to 7%, and the mid-range is about 950K, and sales were off about 2%. So as we start moving more towards the May, June, July timeframe, we should start seeing more activity in the market. Keep in mind that we have very little inventory, and as Kathy Clark mentioned last month, instead of, as interest rates are going up, instead of Dan Ruckman putting up his house for sale, instead of having 20 bids, maybe he's going to have 5 or 6, but there's still going to be a lot of people bidding because we have limited inventory across the board. And so we'll see where that goes. And on a productivity basis, now it comes out once a quarter. The good news is non-farm business sector labor productivity rose by 6.6% in the fourth quarter of last year, which is extremely good. And we saw an increase of 9.1% in the total amount of hours worked. So that's based upon the fact that we're adding more people into the marketplace, people are going back to their offices. So we're moving in the right direction in terms of productivity. Company displacements, good news is nothing of significance. The only time I'm going to report on that is when it's over 1,000. There are layoffs taking place across the board, 50 here, 200 there, but nothing of significance at this point. The one industry you should keep your eye on is the real estate industry, especially in the area of mortgage loans, et cetera, that you're going to see a lot of that taking place over the next several months as interest rates continue to escalate. Now let's talk a little bit about mergers and acquisitions. If you look at this now, for example, there's a firm in Modesto. Modesto-based Safe Start Mart was sold to an LA private equity firm that Safe Mart has been there for 70 years in the Central Valley. And this firm somehow goes in and buys up some of these small shopping areas. So this is by Kingswood Capital Management LP is buying this. If we look at Westfield, that's around the country, you had a company called Unibel Romotico basically bought the malls 4 years ago for $16 billion. They've changed their strategy and they want to liquidate and sell all their malls, which are 24 by 2023, and get out of investing in the United States. So that's the next step for them. Looking at the airline industry, JetBlue has now made an all-cash offer for Spirit Airlines, complicating the deal that Frontier was trying to tie up earlier. So right now we'll have to see where that goes, but JetBlue is going to do whatever they can to buy that company. By doing that, they could be the 5th largest air carrier in the United States. Dave & Buster's, which is a firm in the entertainment industry, basically is buying Main Event for $835 million. Dallas-based event. It's a family entertainment concept that has 50 locations. and it was formed in 1998. The healthcare activity, you're going to see more things taking place in healthcare and biotech. Tivity Health is the leading provider of healthy, life-changing solutions, including silver sneakers. And for those of you that are senior guys, 65 and over, silver sneakers comes to you through your insurance, and that is an incentive to go to the gym at least once a week. But anyway, that company has a lot of these, and that's what they're doing. It's a roll-up strategy based on what they want to do. Berkshire Hathaway is acquiring a company in the insurance industry called Allegheny Corporation for $11.6 billion. Allegheny is primarily a property and casualty insurance company. Its subsidiaries included a lot of the holdings, and that's another acquisition taking place in that space. For those of you who are familiar with Elon Musk, I put this in at the last minute. He's in the process of acquiring Twitter for $44 billion. And assuming that goes forward, what he wants to do is improve, quote, the platform by enhancing it with new features, making the algorithms open source to increase trust, defeating spam bots and authenticating accounts. So we'll see where that goes down the road. So what else is happening out there? Well, there's surging interest rates are pushing demand down for interest rates. So what we're seeing now is that interest rates, mortgage rates, again, last week fell as much as 6%. The volume, if you can believe this, is down 41% from a year ago in terms of applications filing for mortgage application loans. Now, Apple is basically retooling the SE productions is being taken down in the third generation of the Apple iPhone. And basically, it's uncertain about the future and the demand. So they're going to cut production for this product over the next couple of quarters. Now, New Balance is, as you know, is in the tennis shoe business along with other products that they have. Basically, while many retailers are struggling to preserve relationship with overseas vendors and manufacturers against the pandemic and the uncertainty, the shaky foreign situations that are going on out there, they're going to expand their business in the United States, and privately held businesses are going to be buying and building more manufacturing. So they're going to be building a new plant in Massachusetts. And that's underway right now. When we look at we talked about the semiconductor business, and several plants are going to be built in the state of Arizona and also Ohio. And so now a massive company involved in the Taiwanese chemical business is being broken. It's going to be building a plant in Phoenix, Arizona. And that's to accommodate the semiconductor business. And that'll create even more jobs. So you're going to see the state of Arizona in terms of jobs go through the ceiling. You're going to see several new plants being built over the next 2 to 3 years by Intel, Taiwanese investors, and now this chemical plant coming on board. So you're going to see a booming economy in Arizona. And also in the state of Ohio, they're building a complex. And what they'll do is they're going to build 3 semiconductor plants in that area. Those of you familiar with Smart and Final, they're one of the first companies to get a $175,000 fine. You go back during the beginning of the pandemic, the company sold more than 100,000 cartons of eggs illegally priced. What they did is they raised the price of these products by 25%. So they got nailed to the barn door, and then more of these companies are being investigated. We talked about electronic car sales, as we've discussed before. Bruce and I mentioned that there's a real issue with infrastructure. So electronic car sales last year were up by almost 20%. But the surge in car sales is outpacing the availability of charging sites. So there are a lot of charging sites less than demand needs right now across the country. So that's something, and they're not being able to keep up with the problem. So we'll see what happens going forward. And like I said, we're moving more towards electric vehicles, and we have to have the charging stations available to be able to meet those demands. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do now is open up for questions and answers.